Kethavar had seen 1,000 worlds burn. In his 300 years of life, he had watched empires rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores. His long, pale fingers moved across the recording device with practiced ease as he prepared for another assignment. The Zephyrian Empire valued his work highly. Few beings could watch entire civilizations die and still maintain the cold objectivity required for proper historical records. The transport ship hummed quietly as it carried him toward his next destination. Through the viewing port, stars stretched into lines of light as they traveled faster than most species could even dream. Kethavar's large silver eyes reflected the starlight. His kind had mastered space travel when most races were still learning to make fire. They had seen it all before. Approaching Hadron's gate system, the ship's voice announced. Kethavar straightened his tall, thin frame and checked his equipment one final time. Recording devices, energy scanners, communication arrays, everything a proper chronicler needed to document another war. This assignment seemed routine. A human colony had established itself on a frontier world. Two powerful alien factions wanted the planet for themselves. The Vorthak hegemony claimed the world's energy-rich crystals. The Kralith warrior clans wanted it as a proving ground for their young fighters. Both had existed long before humans even discovered fire. The humans were trapped between them. Simple mathematics suggested they would either surrender quickly or die trying to fight. Kethavar expected to document their final moments for the historical archive. Another footnote in galactic history. Hadron's Gate appeared in the viewing screen. A brown and green world with two small moons. Scanning reports showed it was rich in minerals but had dangerous weather patterns. Strong winds, sudden storms, and toxic gases that erupted from underground without warning. Not an easy place to build a home. The human settlement sat in a valley between two mountain ranges. From orbit it looked small and fragile. A few hundred buildings made from local stone and metal. Basic defensive walls that wouldn't stop a child's toy weapons. Kethavar shook his head. These humans had no idea what was coming for them. His ship landed at the settlement's small spaceport. The landing pad was crude, just flattened dirt with some metal plates. No energy shields, no automated systems. Everything looked hand-built and temporary. Kethavar gathered his equipment and stepped onto the surface of Hadron's Gate. The air was thin and carried the smell of metal and stone. Gravity was slightly heavier than standard, making his movements feel sluggish. In the distance, one of the planet's famous windstorms was building. Dark clouds twisted into spiral patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't deadly. A human approached him. She was smaller than Kethavar, as all humans were, with dark skin and short black hair. Her clothes were practical, worn fabrics that had been repaired many times. She carried no visible weapons, but her eyes were alert and sharp. "Welcome to New Terra," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen. We've been expecting you." Kethavar studied her carefully. She showed no signs of fear or stress despite knowing that two alien armies were coming to destroy her home. Either she was very good at hiding her emotions or humans were even more foolish than the report suggested. "I am Kethavar of the Zephyrian Historical Archive," he replied, touching her hand briefly. The human skin was warm and soft, confirming their physical weakness. "I'm here to document the coming conflict," Sarah smiled. It was not the desperate smile of someone facing death, but something else. Something that made Kethavar pause. "Of course. We've prepared quarters for you. Please, let me show you around before things get interesting." She led him through the settlement. The buildings were indeed simple, but Kethavar noticed they were built with surprising intelligence. The placement took advantage of natural windbreaks. The foundations were deep and strong. These humans had studied their environment carefully. The people they passed were equally puzzling. Men, women, and children went about their daily tasks without panic. Some were tending to crops that grew in specially designed greenhouse structures. Others worked in workshops, building tools and equipment from salvaged materials. Everyone nodded politely to Kethavar, but none seemed overly concerned about their visitor or their situation. "How many are you?" Kethavar asked. "About 3,000, Sarah replied. "Farmers, engineers, teachers, doctors. Families who wanted a fresh start away from the crowded core worlds." "And your military?" Sarah's smile grew wider. "Everyone here is military when they need to be. We all learn to fight during the journey. Space travel teaches you that danger can come from anywhere at any time." They stopped at a building that overlooked the settlement's main gate. Sarah opened the door and gestured for Kethavar to enter. The room was simple but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and large window that provided an excellent view of the surrounding area. "The Vorthak will arrive first," Sarah said, as if discussing the weather. "Tomorrow morning, if our calculations are correct. The Kralith will come 3 days later. We're ready for both." Kethvar set down his equipment and activated his recording systems. "Commander Chen, I must ask, do you understand what you're facing? The Vorthak hegemony has conquered 17 star systems. Their energy weapons can melt stone from orbit. The Kralith have never lost a ground battle. Their warriors are bred for war from birth." Sarah nodded. "Yes, we've studied them both extensively. The Vorthak rely too heavily on their technology. They assume their energy shields make them invincible. The Kralith believe physical strength determines victory. They're both wrong, but they don't know it yet." The casual confidence in her voice disturbed Kethvar more than fear would have. This human spoke as if she had already won a battle that hadn't started yet. Either she was insane, or there was something about humans that the galactic intelligence reports had missed. That evening, Kethvar watched the settlement prepare for war. The humans moved with quiet efficiency, but not in ways he expected. Instead of building bigger weapons or stronger walls, they seemed to be preparing the planet itself. They spread strange devices across the valley. They sealed certain caves while opening others. They moved equipment to specific locations that seemed to serve no obvious defensive purpose. When night fell, Kethvar stood at his window and watched the humans work by artificial light. They labored in small groups, communicating with hand signals and quiet words. There was no rushing, no panic, no desperate prayers to their gods. They worked like people following a plan they had practiced many times. As he prepared his first report for the historical archive, Kethvar found himself struggling to categorize what he had observed. The humans showed none of the typical behaviors of a doomed population. They displayed no surrender negotiations, no evacuation preparations, no appeals for galactic intervention. Instead, they acted like predators preparing a trap. Kethvar dismissed the thought as ridiculous. Humans were prey species, soft, weak, short-lived creatures who had barely learned to travel between stars. The idea that they could threaten races like the Vorthak or Kralith was absurd. But as he sealed his report and prepared for sleep, one image remained in his mind: Commander Sarah Chen's smile when she said the enemy armies were coming. It was not the smile of someone facing death. It was the smile of someone looking forward to a hunt. The Vorthak ships arrived like silver daggers cutting through the morning sky. Kethvar watched from his window as 12 sleek vessels descended toward the human settlement. Their hulls gleamed with energy shields that bent light around them like water. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. Commander Sarah Chen appeared beside him at the window, carrying 2 cups of what humans called coffee. The hot liquid smelled strange but not unpleasant. She offered one to Kethvar with the same calm smile she had worn the day before. "They're early," she said, sipping her drink. "We calculated they'd arrive after noon." "Interesting." Kethvar accepted the cup but didn't drink. His hands trembled slightly as the Vorthak ship settled into a landing formation around the settlement. "Commander, perhaps now would be a good time to consider surrender terms." Sarah shook her head. "We already considered them. The Vorthak want us as slaves. That's not acceptable." The largest Vorthak ship landed directly in front of the settlement's main gate. It was twice the size of any human structure, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. A loading ramp extended downward with a soft hiss. 30 Vorthak soldiers marched out in perfect formation. They were tall and thin, like stretched shadows wearing silver armor. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that glowed with internal displays. Each carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Behind them came their commander. Even among his own kind, he was impressive. 8 feet tall with armor that seemed to absorb light. Symbols on his chest indicated high rank in the hegemony. His weapon was larger than the others and pulsed with red energy. The Vorthak commander activated a device that projected his voice across the settlement. "Humans of New Terra, I am Sub-Marshal Vexoth of the Vorthak hegemony. This world now belongs to us. You will surrender immediately and submit to processing as indentured workers. You have one of your hours to decide." Kethvar expected the humans to at least show fear. Instead, people continued their daily activities as if armed aliens hadn't just landed outside their door. Children played in the streets. Adults tended to their work. Some even waved politely at the Vorthak soldiers. Your people seem very calm, Kethavar observed. Why shouldn't they be? Sarah replied. We knew this was coming. An hour passed. The Vorthak commander grew visibly agitated as no response came from the settlement. Finally, he activated his speaker again. Your time has expired. We will now demonstrate the consequences of defiance. He raised his weapon and fired at the settlement's main gate. The energy beam struck the metal barrier and bounced off. The redirected energy hit one of the Vorthak ships, causing minor damage to its hull. Submarshal Vexoth stared at his weapon in confusion. Sarah grinned. Local minerals make excellent reflective surfaces when prepared correctly. We've known about the Vorthak energy weapons for months. More energy beams lanced toward the settlement, but they all deflected harmlessly away. Some struck the ground and created glass craters. Others bounced into the sky and disappeared into the atmosphere. The Vorthak soldiers began firing wildly, their perfect formation breaking down as panic set in. That's when the humans struck back. Hidden panels in the settlement walls slid open. Human defenders appeared with weapons that looked crude compared to Vorthak technology. Projectile guns, explosive devices, even modified mining equipment. But they used them with devastating precision. The first volley didn't target the Vorthak soldiers directly. Instead, the humans aimed at the ground around the alien formation. The projectiles contained some kind of local mineral that created thick clouds of metallic dust when they exploded. The dust interfered with Vorthak energy shields, causing them to flicker and fail. With their shields down, the Vorthak were vulnerable. The second human volley was aimed to kill. Solid projectiles punched through alien armor. Explosive devices sent shrapnel flying into enemy ranks. What had seemed like an overwhelming technological advantage evaporated in seconds. But the humans weren't finished. Groups of fighters emerged from hidden tunnels behind the Vorthak position. They carried nets made from local plant fibers that somehow disrupted Vorthak equipment. Soldiers who became entangled found their weapons shutting down, their armor losing power. Kethavar watched in growing amazement as the humans demonstrated something he had never seen before. They didn't just fight the Vorthak, they had studied them. Every weakness in Vorthak technology had been identified and exploited. Every tactical assumption had been turned against them. Submarshal Vexoth tried to retreat to his ship, but found his path blocked by more humans. These carried strange devices that projected focused sound waves. The noise disrupted Vorthak communication systems and caused physical pain to their sensitive hearing. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it ended, half the Vorthak force was dead or disabled. The survivors huddled around their damaged ships, no longer looking like conquering warriors but like confused and frightened children. Sarah walked out to meet the submarshal. She carried no weapons and showed no fear of the alien who towered over her. You can leave now, she said simply. Take your dead and go. Tell your superiors that New Terra is not available for conquest. Submarshal Vexoth's helmet displays flickered erratically. How? He demanded. Your weapons are primitive. Your defenses are basic. How did you defeat us? We watched you fight other people, Sarah replied. We studied your tactics, your equipment, your psychology. We learned everything we needed to know before you ever arrived here. You're very predictable. The Vorthak commander's weapon hand shook with rage or fear. This is impossible. Humans are a young species. You lack the knowledge to counter our technology. Sarah's expression remained calm. We lack a lot of things. Knowledge isn't one of them. We learn very quickly, especially from our enemies. The Vorthak began loading their casualties and retreating to their ships. Several vessels had to be abandoned because human weapons had damaged their systems beyond quick repair. As they prepared to leave, Submarshal Vexoth turned back to Sarah. The Kralith will not be so easily defeated, he warned. They do not rely on technology. Their strength comes from within. I know, Sarah replied. We're looking forward to meeting them. As the Vorthak ships lifted off and disappeared into the sky, Kethavar found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about humans. The battle had not been won through superior firepower or advanced technology. It had been won through careful study, intelligent planning, and perfect execution. The humans had turned the Vorthak's greatest strength, their reliance on energy weapons, into their greatest weakness. They had used the planet itself as a weapon, employing local materials and environmental knowledge that the aliens lacked. Most disturbing of all, they had done it without seeming effort. There had been no desperate last stands, no heroic sacrifices, no luck involved. The humans had simply implemented a plan they had obviously practiced many times. "How long have you been preparing for this?" Cathvar asked Sarah as they watched the last Vorthak ship disappear. "Since we arrived here," she replied. "We knew someone would come eventually. Frontier worlds always attract attention. We just made sure we were ready." "And the Kralith?" Sarah's smile returned. "Oh, we have something special planned for them. They think strength and honor will carry the day. They're about to learn that there are many different kinds of strength." As Cathvar returned to his quarters to file his report, he found himself struggling to describe what he had witnessed. How could he explain to the historical archive that a supposedly primitive human colony had easily defeated one of the galaxy's most technologically advanced militaries? More troubling was the realization that this had not been a desperate victory. The humans had won because they had planned to win. They had studied their enemy with the cold precision of natural predators. For the first time in his long life, Cathvar began to wonder if the galaxy had made a serious mistake in underestimating humanity. The Kralith arrived like a storm made of flesh and fury. Their ships were massive, ugly things covered in spikes and armor plating. They didn't land gracefully like the Vorthak vessels. Instead, they crashed into the ground with enough force to shake the entire settlement. Dust and debris flew everywhere as loading ramps slammed down. Cathvar stood at his window, still trying to process what he had seen 3 days earlier. The humans had spent those days cleaning up after their victory over the Vorthak. They had repaired damage, collected alien equipment, and somehow seemed even more relaxed than before. The first Kralith warrior to emerge from the ships was a giant. 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor plating that looked like gray stone. His muscles were thick as tree trunks. Scars covered his arms and face, marks of honor in Kralith culture. He carried a weapon that was part axe, part club, and completely terrifying. More warriors followed. 50 of them, each one a walking monument to violence and strength. Their equipment was simple but effective. Heavy armor, massive weapons, and shields made from the bones of dangerous creatures. They formed ranks with military precision, but their discipline was different from the Vorthak. Where the Vorthak had been cold and technological, the Kralith radiated heat and barely controlled aggression. Their leader was the largest of them all. War Chief Gorthak stood 9 feet tall and was so muscular that his armor had to be specially made to fit him. His weapon was a double-headed axe that glowed with some kind of energy field. Ritual tattoos covered his face and arms, telling the story of every battle he had won. "Humans." Gorthak's voice boomed across the settlement without any amplification device. "I am War Chief Gorthak of the Kralith warrior clans. We claim this world by right of strength. Face us in honorable combat or die as cowards." Sarah Chen walked out to meet them. Beside the massive Kralith warriors, she looked like a child confronting giants. She carried no weapons and wore no armor. Her simple clothes fluttered in the wind as she approached the alien formation. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen," she called back. "We appreciate the formal challenge, but we decline. This world is ours." Gorthak laughed, a sound like boulders grinding together. "Little human, do you not understand? We are Kralith. We have never lost a battle. Our strength is legendary across the galaxy. Your energy weapons will not save you as they failed to save the Vorthak." "We're not planning to use energy weapons," Sarah replied calmly. The war chief's expression grew puzzled. "Then how will you fight? Your bodies are weak. Your muscles are small. You have no natural armor or claws. What hope do you have against true warriors?" Sarah smiled, that same disturbing smile Cathvar had seen before. "Would you like to find out?" What followed was unlike any battle Cathvar had ever witnessed. The Kralith expected the humans to gather their forces and meet them in open combat. Instead, the humans simply vanished. One moment, people had been visible throughout the settlement. The next, the streets were empty except for Sarah, who stood alone facing 50 alien warriors. Gorthak roared in frustration. "Cowards! Face us properly." "We are," Sarah said. That's when the first Kralith warrior fell. He had been standing at the edge of the formation when something struck him from behind. Not an energy weapon or explosive device, but a simple metal projectile fired from somewhere in the settlement. The shot had been perfectly placed to slip between armor plates and strike a vital organ. The fallen warrior's comrades spun around, weapons ready, but there was nothing to attack. The shot had come from an impossible angle, fired by someone they couldn't see. A second warrior fell. Then a third. Each shot came from a different direction, fired by invisible humans who struck with surgical precision and then disappeared again. "Show yourselves," Gorthak bellowed, swinging his massive axe at empty air. "We're right here," said a voice behind him. The war chief spun around to find a human soldier standing less than 10 feet away. The man was small compared to the Kralith, wearing simple combat gear and carrying a basic projectile weapon. He should have been an easy target. Gorthak charged with the speed and power that had made him legendary. His axe swept through the air with enough force to cut a tree in half, but when it reached the spot where the human had been standing, there was nothing there. The human had moved, not with any special technology or supernatural ability, but with timing so perfect it seemed impossible. He had stepped aside at exactly the right moment, letting the massive weapon pass harmlessly by, then struck back with his own weapon. The strike didn't kill Gorthak. The war chief's armor was too strong for that, but it found a gap in the plating and drew blood. First blood against a Kralith war chief, drawn by a creature the alien had dismissed as weak and pathetic. More human soldiers appeared throughout the battlefield. They moved in ways that defied Kralith understanding of combat. Instead of meeting strength with strength, they used the alien's own power against them. When a Kralith warrior swung his weapon, the humans weren't there. When the aliens tried to pursue, they found obstacles in their path or discovered that the ground beneath their feet had been weakened. Kethavar watched in growing amazement as the humans demonstrated a completely different kind of strength. They were indeed smaller and weaker than the Kralith, but they were also faster, smarter, and infinitely more adaptable. The Kralith fought with the fury of legendary warriors, but their every move seemed to be anticipated. Human soldiers appeared where they were least expected, struck with perfect precision, then vanished before retaliation was possible. What's more, the humans were learning. Each Kralith warrior who fell taught them something new about alien anatomy, fighting techniques, or weaknesses. They adapted their tactics in real time, becoming more effective with each passing minute. A group of Kralith warriors cornered what they thought was an isolated human soldier. They closed in from all sides, certain they had finally trapped one of their elusive enemies, but the human had led them into a carefully prepared kill zone. Hidden explosives detonated beneath their feet, while concealed shooters opened fire from elevated positions. The trap had been set specifically for Kralith psychology. The humans had known that warrior pride would make the aliens pursue what seemed like easy prey. They had used that knowledge to turn the hunters into the hunted. War Chief Gorthak found himself fighting Sarah Chen in single combat. Even wounded and confused, he was still a formidable opponent. His strength was real, his skill undeniable. But Sarah fought with a precision that was almost mathematical. She had studied Kralith anatomy, fighting techniques, and psychological patterns. Every move Gorthak made had been anticipated and countered. When he struck with his axe, she was already moving to avoid it. When he tried to grapple, she slipped away like water. More disturbing still, she was hurting him, not through superior strength but by targeting specific points on his body with surgical accuracy. Each strike found gaps in his armor, weak points in his stance, or spots where previous wounds made him vulnerable. How? Gorthak gasped as another perfectly placed shot found its mark. "You are weak. I am strong. This is not possible." "Strength isn't just about muscles," Sarah replied, firing again. "It's about knowing exactly where and when to apply force. We've studied you, War Chief. We know every weakness, every blind spot, every mistake your people make in combat." The battle lasted 2 hours. When it ended, 30 Kralith warriors lay dead or unconscious. The survivors clustered around their fallen leader, staring at the humans with something that might have been respect or terror. Gorthak was still alive, but barely. Sarah knelt beside him as human medics worked to stabilize his wounds. "You fought well," she said. "But you fought like you always fight." "We fought like we needed to fight. Gorthak struggled to speak. "You dishonor combat. Warriors should meet strength with strength. Warriors should win," Sarah replied simply. "Everything else is just tradition." As the surviving Kralith gathered their dead and prepared to leave, Kethavar realized he had witnessed something unprecedented. The humans hadn't just defeated 2 different alien forces. They had done so using completely different methods for each enemy. Against the technology-dependent Vorthak, they had used environmental advantages and superior preparation. Against the strength-focused Kralith, they had employed speed, precision, and tactical brilliance. The humans hadn't tried to be stronger than their enemies. They had simply been smarter. They had studied, learned, adapted, and won through pure intellectual superiority disguised as weakness. As he prepared his second report for the historical archive, Kethavar found himself facing a disturbing truth. The humans weren't just lucky or stubborn. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that treated every conflict as a learning experience. They didn't just fight to survive. They fought to understand, and what they understood they mastered. The message arrived 7 days after the Kralith retreat. Cathvar was reviewing his notes when his communication device chimed with an incoming transmission. The signal was heavily encrypted and came from somewhere beyond the system's edge. Sarah Chen entered his quarters as he decoded the message. She carried her usual cup of coffee and wore the same calm expression she had maintained throughout both battles. "Interesting news?" she asked, settling into a chair. "Most unusual," Kethavar replied, studying the decoded text. "It appears the Vorthak and Kralith have formed an alliance." Sarah nodded as if this was expected. "How long until they return?" Kethavar checked the technical data embedded in the message. The transmission suggests they're already en route. Combined fleet, possibly 3 times larger than their individual forces. He expected this news to finally break through Sarah's calm demeanor. Instead, she smiled wider than he had ever seen. "Perfect. We've been hoping they would do that." "Hoping?" Kethavar set down his device and stared at her. "Commander, you do understand what this means? The Vorthak and Kralith have been enemies for centuries. They have never worked together. For them to unite against you means they finally understand the threat we represent," Sarah finished. "It also means our experiments are complete." The word experiments sent a chill through Kethavar's long frame. "What experiments?" Before Sarah could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the settlement. Not the harsh warning sounds of an emergency, but the steady, organized tones of a planned response. Through the window, Kethavar could see humans moving with the same quiet efficiency they had shown before both previous battles. But this time was different. The humans weren't just preparing defensive positions. They were dismantling them. Walls came down. Hidden weapon emplacements were being removed. The careful preparations that had defeated 2 alien armies were being erased. "What are you doing?" Kethavar demanded. "Getting ready for the real test," Sarah replied. The combined fleet arrived 18 hours later. It was the largest military force Kethavar had ever seen assembled for the conquest of a single world. 40 Vorthak ships with their gleaming energy shields flew in formation with 30 Kralith vessels covered in battle. Scars and weapon ports leading them was a massive command ship that clearly belonged to neither species. It was a hybrid vessel, combining Vorthak energy technology with Kralith armor and weapons. The sight of it made Kethavar's recording devices tremble in his hands. The fleet didn't land immediately. Instead, they took positions in orbit and began scanning the settlement. For hours, streams of sensor data flowed between the ships as they analyzed every detail of the human defenses. Finally, a new voice echoed across the settlement. It was electronically enhanced but carried undertones of both Vorthak precision and Kralith aggression. "Humans of New Terra, I am Alliance Commander Zethkar. Our forces have studied your previous victories. We have adapted. Your tricks will not work against our combined might." Sarah walked out to address the fleet, just as she had done twice before. But this time she wasn't alone. The entire human population of New Terra emerged from their buildings and stood with her. 3,000 men, women, and children facing an orbital bombardment force. "We're ready when you are," Sarah called up to the ships. What happened next defied every rule of warfare Kethavar knew. The massive combined fleet did nothing. They hung in orbit, scanning and rescanning, analyzing every possible threat, searching for hidden weapons or defensive positions. They found none. The humans had indeed dismantled their defenses. No energy reflective barriers, no hidden tunnels, no environmental traps, just 3,000 people standing in an open valley, looking up at a fleet that could turn their world to glass. Hours passed. The alien fleet remained in orbit, paralyzed by their inability to detect any threat. Finally, Alliance Commander Zethkar spoke again, confusion evident in his voice. "Where are your defenses? Your weapons? Your traps?" "We don't need them anymore," Sarah replied. "Impossible. You defeated the Vorthak with environmental advantages. You defeated the Kralith with guerrilla tactics. You must have some plan." "We do," Sarah confirmed, "but not the kind you're thinking of." That's when the first strange ship appeared at the edge of the system. It was sleek and silver, clearly not of human design but somehow familiar. Kethavar's recording devices identified it as Vorthak in origin, but the energy signatures were all wrong. More ships followed. Kralith vessels, but modified in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Then came ships that were clearly human in design, but incorporated technology from both alien species. Within an hour, a second fleet had assembled. It was smaller than the Alliance force, but the ships radiated power signatures that made Kethavar's instruments scream warnings. "What is this?" Alliance Commander Zethkar demanded. A new voice answered from the approaching fleet. It was human, but spoke with an authority that made the settlement commander look like a junior officer. "This is Admiral Rebecca Hayes of the Human Research Division. We're here to collect our data." The truth hit Kethavar like a physical blow. New Terra wasn't a desperate frontier colony. It was a research station. The humans hadn't been fighting for their survival. They had been conducting experiments on two of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. Sarah turned to address Kethavar directly. "Did you really think we would send 3,000 civilians to establish a colony in disputed space without backup? Everything that happened here was planned from the beginning. The Vorthak attack taught us how to counter energy-based weapons and shield technology," Admiral Hayes announced from her flagship. "The Kralith assault provided data on defeating superior physical forces through tactical adaptation. Both species performed exactly as predicted." Alliance Commander Zethkar's voice cracked with rage. "You used us. We were test subjects. Very good test subjects," Admiral Hayes confirmed. "Your attack patterns, weapon specifications, technological capabilities, psychological profiles, all recorded and analyzed. We now know exactly how to defeat both your species, individually or combined." The alien fleet opened fire in a desperate fury. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles filled the space between the fleets. But the human ships moved like they knew where every shot would go before it was fired. Their defensive systems perfectly countered both Vorthak energy weapons and Kralith projectile attacks. The humans fired back with weapons that seemed specifically designed to exploit every weakness their enemies possessed. Vorthak shields failed against frequencies the humans had learned to generate. Kralith armor cracked under projectiles engineered to penetrate their specific metallurgy. Most terrifying of all, the human fleet fought with the combined tactics of both enemy species. They used Vorthak precision and coordination alongside Kralith aggression and adaptability. They had taken the best aspects of both alien military doctrines and merged them into something more effective than either original. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the combined alien fleet was scattered wreckage drifting in orbit. Most of the crews had been captured rather than killed, more test subjects for future research. As Admiral Hayes' ships began cleanup operations, Sarah turned back to Kethavar. "Now you understand why we were so confident. We weren't fighting to survive. We were fighting to learn. But why?" Kethavar asked, his voice hollow with shock. "Why go to such lengths? Why risk so much?" "Because the galaxy is a dangerous place," Sarah replied. "There are threats out there that make the Vorthak and Kralith look like children playing with toys. Ancient powers, sleeping empires, things that haven't awakened yet but will someday. When they do, humanity needs to be ready." Admiral Hayes materialized as a hologram beside them. "Every species we encounter teaches us something new about warfare, technology, or survival. The Vorthak showed us the limitations of energy dependence. The Kralith demonstrated the weaknesses of honor-based combat. When the real threats emerge, we'll be prepared for anything." Kethavar stared at the two human women, one who had seemed like a simple colonial administrator, the other who commanded a fleet that had just destroyed the combined might of two galactic powers. "What are you?" he whispered. Sarah and Admiral Hayes exchanged glances. When they looked back at Kethavar, both wore the same predatory smile. "We're humans," Sarah said simply. "We learn." Kethavar sat alone in his quarters, staring at the recording device that contained everything he had witnessed. Outside his window, human ships moved through the wreckage of the alien fleet like scavengers picking clean a carcass. But they weren't just salvaging materials. They were collecting data, studying every piece of destroyed technology, analyzing every failed tactic. Even in victory, they were still learning. Admiral Hayes had departed with most of her fleet. taking captured alien crews to research facilities that Kethvar suspected existed throughout human space. Sarah Chen remained on New Terra, overseeing the cleanup and preparing for the settlement's next phase of operations. "Trouble with your report?" Sarah asked, entering the room with her usual quiet confidence. Kethvar gestured helplessly at his recording device. "How do I explain this to the historical archive? How do I tell them that humanity has been studying the galaxy like specimens in a laboratory?" "Tell them the truth," Sarah replied, settling into her familiar chair. "That's what you're here for, isn't it?" "The truth is terrifying." Kethvar's silver eyes reflected the starlight streaming through the window. "The truth is that humans have been manipulating galactic conflicts for research purposes. The truth is that every species who has encountered humanity has unknowingly provided data for their destruction." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Not destruction, understanding. There's a difference." "Is there?" Kethvar challenged. "You've just demonstrated that you can defeat the Vorthak and Kralith simultaneously. How many other species have you studied? How many more do you plan to examine?" "All of them, eventually." Sarah's honesty was somehow more chilling than any lie. "Every intelligent species in the galaxy has something to teach us. Different technologies, combat philosophies, social structures, weaknesses we can exploit, or strengths we can adapt." Kethvar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "And my people? The Zephyrians? Already studied." Sarah's smile was gentle but relentless. "Your species' longevity and observational skills make you excellent chroniclers but terrible warriors. Your technology is advanced but lacks adaptability. Your society values knowledge over action, which creates exploitable delays in decision-making." The casual way she dissected his entire civilization made Kethvar's hands shake. "When how?" "We've been watching Zephyrian historical records for decades. Your people document everything, but rarely consider that your subjects might be studying you in return. Very thorough, very predictable, very vulnerable to anyone who understands your psychological patterns." Kethvar realized with growing horror that his presence here wasn't coincidence. "You requested me specifically." "Of course. We needed a witness whose testimony would be believed by the galactic community. Zephyrian chroniclers are trusted throughout known space. Your report will carry weight that ours wouldn't. You want me to warn them. We want you to educate them." Sarah's tone remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. "The galaxy needs to understand what humanity represents. Not a threat to be eliminated, but a force of nature to be respected." Kethvar stood and walked to the window, watching human workers systematically catalog alien technology. "You're not conquerors. You're something worse." "We're survivors," Sarah corrected. "The universe is vast and dangerous. Life is fragile and temporary. The only way to ensure human survival is to understand everything that might threaten us and be prepared for any possible conflict. By turning every encounter into a learning experience. By treating every encounter as a potential lesson in warfare, technology, or survival." "Yes." Kethvar turned back to face her. "What happens when you've studied everyone? When you've learned all there is to learn?" Sarah's expression grew distant, as if considering something far beyond their current conversation. "Then we'll be ready for whatever comes next. The galaxy is large, but it's not empty. There are things out there that dwarf the Vorthak and Kralith. Ancient powers that have been sleeping for millions of years. Entities that exist between dimensions. Threats that haven't revealed themselves yet. And you'll be ready for them. We'll be ready for anything." The certainty in her voice was absolute, because we'll have learned from everything that came before. Kethvar returned to his recording device and began composing his final report. As he worked, Sarah watched quietly, occasionally offering details or clarifications. She seemed genuinely interested in ensuring the historical record was accurate. "Why help me with this?" Kethvar asked. "Surely it would serve your purposes better to let me remain confused." "Confusion breeds fear. Fear breeds mistakes. We prefer our subjects to understand exactly what they're dealing with." Sarah paused. "Besides, you're going to tell them anyway. Better that you tell them correctly." As Kethvar wrote, he began to understand the true scope of what he had witnessed. New Terra wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a vast human research program spanning the galaxy. Every conflict, every first contact, every diplomatic encounter was being carefully orchestrated to provide maximum learning opportunities. Humanity wasn't expanding into the galaxy like traditional species. They were studying it, mapping its strengths and weaknesses, preparing for conflicts that might not occur for centuries. They thought in timescales that dwarfed even Zephyrian lifespans. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Since we first reached the stars," Sarah replied. "We discovered quickly that we weren't the strongest species or the most technologically advanced or the longest lived. But we learned that we had one advantage no other species possessed. Which was? We never stop learning. Other species reach a plateau and maintain it. They develop their technology to a certain point, establish their territories, create their social structures, and then they stop, they become static." Sarah gestured toward the window, where human ships continued their methodical analysis of alien wreckage. "Humans never stop. We never reach a point where we're satisfied with our knowledge or capabilities. Every day brings new questions, new challenges, new opportunities to grow. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes us human." Kethvar completed his report. As the sun set over New Terra, the document was longer than any he had ever written, filled with details that would revolutionize galactic understanding of humanity or terrify it into submission. "What will happen when the galaxy reads this?" he asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. "Some species will try to unite against us. Others will attempt to hide or isolate themselves. A few might try to ally with us for protection. All of them will be making decisions based on incomplete information. Because you're still studying them. Because we're always studying them. Every reaction to this report will provide new data about galactic psychology, military capabilities, and survival instincts. Even their attempts to counter us will teach us more about how they think and fight." The full implications hit Kethvar like a physical blow. "There's no way to win against you, is there? Fighting teaches you how to defeat military forces. Hiding teaches you about stealth and concealment. Allying teaches you about trust and betrayal. Even doing nothing teaches you about passivity and fear. Now you're beginning to understand." Kethvar sealed his report and prepared to transmit it to the historical archive. As he did, he realized he was about to become part of humanity's grand experiment. His warning would trigger reactions across the galaxy, and those reactions would provide humans with even more data about their potential enemies. "I'm helping you," he said with dawning horror. "Yes," Sarah confirmed, "but you don't have a choice. The truth needs to be told, and you're the one who witnessed it. Besides, even if you said nothing, we'd find other ways to gather the information we need." As Kethvar sent his report into the Galactic Communication Network, he felt like he was signing the death warrant for civilized space, not because humans would destroy everything, but because they would understand everything. And in a universe where knowledge was power, complete understanding meant absolute dominance. "Why are you telling me all this?" he asked one final time. Sarah stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Because you asked the right questions. Because your people value truth over comfort. And because in the end it doesn't matter what you know." "Why not?" Her smile was sad and terrifying and completely human. "Because we've already won. We won the moment we decided that learning was more important than living. Every day we survive, we learn something new. Every day we learn something new. We become harder to kill." She left Kethvar alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that he had witnessed the end of the galactic order, as he knew it. Not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple human refusal to stop asking questions. In the distance, human ships continued their work, cataloging alien technology and analyzing battle data. They worked with the patient dedication of a species that measured success in geological timescales and considered setbacks merely additional learning opportunities. Kethvar had watched them battle and learned why legends fear humans. They didn't fight to win battles. They fought to win wars that hadn't started yet. They didn't seek victory, they sought understanding. And once they understood something completely, it ceased to be a threat. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to be studied by humanity.